It was supposed to be a normal flight. On December 18, 2022, United Airlines Flight 1722 took off from Maui, Hawaii, heading for San Francisco. The weather was stormy, the skies were dark, and the winds were unpredictable, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary at first. The giant Boeing 777 climbed into the air, shaking slightly in the rough weather. The pilots followed routine, focused and calm. But within minutes of takeoff, something went terribly wrong. The plane suddenly dropped, fast, from over 2,000 feet above the ocean to just 700 feet in seconds. Passengers screamed, alarms went off. The pilots were now in a desperate race to save the plane and everyone on board. So what went wrong? What caused this sudden dive? Was it human error or something else? This is the terrifying story of Flight 1722. It was the afternoon of December 18, 2022. At Kahului Airport in Maui, Hawaii, the skies were gray and the rain was coming down hard. Storm clouds hovered over the island, making it clear this wasn't going to be an easy day to fly. Winds were shifting, visibility was low, and there were reports of dangerous sudden change in wind speed or direction, known to cause serious problems for airplanes, especially during takeoff and landing. Still, United Airlines Flight 1722 was scheduled to depart on time. It was a Boeing 777-200, a large long-range aircraft, preparing for a 5-hour journey across the Pacific Ocean to San Francisco International Airport. The massive aircraft was carrying 281 people. Inside the cockpit were 2 pilots. The captain, aged 55, was highly experienced. He had over 19,600 flight hours and more than 5,000 hours on the Boeing 777. For this flight, he was the pilot flying, meaning he was in control of the aircraft's movements. Next to him sat the first officer. He had previously worked for Hawaiian Airlines and had logged about 5,300 flight hours, but he was still new to this particular aircraft. With only 120 hours on the Boeing 777, he was the pilot monitoring. His job was to assist the captain and handle communication. Before takeoff, the pilots went through their usual checks. The first officer did a walk-around inspection of the plane. The captain spoke to the lead flight attendant, warning her about the bad weather ahead and advising the cabin crew to stay seated during the climb. Then, just before entering the cockpit, the first officer received a text message. A friend had warned him that Hawaiian Airlines Flight 35 had hit severe turbulence earlier that day while landing in Honolulu. 36 people had been injured, including 3 crew members and even a 1-year-old child. The message was a clear reminder. The skies around Hawaii were dangerous that day. He thanked his friend, switched off his phone, and passed the warning on to the captain. As 281 passengers boarded the plane, the pilots reviewed performance data. There was a problem, though. The automatic weather system at the airport wasn't working, so they had to call the tower directly to get wind and runway information. They were first told to take off from runway 20, with light winds from the south. Based on this, the flight computer recommended using flaps 20 with reduced engine thrust, an unusual setup, but suitable for the conditions. Normally, a Boeing 777 uses flaps 15 for takeoff, but because the runway was short and the weather tricky, flaps 20 would give them more lift. The first officer, still learning the aircraft, may not have been fully comfortable with this change, and then just minutes before departure, the tower informed them the active runway had changed. They would now be departing from runway 02 instead. The pilots quickly adjusted their plan. Given the reports of low-level wind shear, they decided to use maximum engine thrust for takeoff just to be safe. At 2:30 p.m., the plane pushed back from the gate. Engines roared to life. The runway was wet. The weather radar lit up with patches of turbulence ahead. By 2:49 p.m., they were cleared for takeoff. United Airlines Flight 1722 rolled down the runway and lifted off into the stormy skies. At first, it all seemed normal, but what the crew didn't know was that within minutes, the flight would go from routine to terrifying. Before we dive into what went wrong, make sure to hit that like button. It helps more people discover these deep dive aviation stories. The weather was still bad. Heavy clouds above, wet runway below. Rain streaked across the windshield, and the wind howled around the massive aircraft. The captain pushed the throttle forward. The engines roared to full power, maximum thrust to fight through the strong winds and get the jet safely off the ground. The plane accelerated fast. As the wheels lifted off the runway, the Boeing 777 climbed smoothly through the rain, but only for a moment. About 20 seconds into the flight, something changed. The aircraft passed through 1,000 feet and then everything started to go wrong. Suddenly, the nose of the plane pitched downward sharply. The jet began diving fast, far faster than anyone on board realized. Inside the cabin, passengers felt it. There was no announcement, no explanation. Just a terrifying sensation of the plane dipping hard, the seatbelts pulling tight against their bodies. This wasn't turbulence. This wasn't a minor dip. This was a full-scale dive. The first officer, who was flying the aircraft at that moment, misjudged the controls during the climb. He pushed the yoke forward, likely believing the aircraft was climbing too steeply. But in doing so, he overcorrected. The autopilot was still off, and the aircraft instantly responded, diving downward at a rate of over 8,000 feet per minute. From the outside, the massive Boeing 777, one of the largest passenger aircraft in the world, was now pointed toward the ocean, falling fast. In the cockpit, the captain realized something was terribly wrong. The stall warning never triggered, because this was no stall. This was a control input error, and the jet was now in a dangerous nose-down attitude. The Enhanced Ground Proximity Warning System, EGPWS, likely gave altitude alerts, but there was no time to wait for instructions. The first officer, realizing the dive, shouted, "Go around, go around, go around!" The captain took immediate control. He pulled back on the yoke, added full thrust to the engines, and leveled the aircraft. The plane responded, barely. At its lowest point, United 1722 was flying at just 775 feet above the Pacific Ocean. That's barely higher than a tall skyscraper. Had they waited even 2 more seconds, the jet could have hit the water. Inside the cabin, passengers felt the drop. Some later said it felt like the plane had fallen straight down. Some screamed. Most clutched their armrests. The Boeing 777 then pitches up to 23 degrees nose up, and the aircraft begins climbing again at a rate of 8,680 feet per minute. The immediate crisis is over. The GPWS warnings stop. The aircraft stabilizes. The climb continues normally, and the crew begins checking for any signs of damage or passenger injuries. The purser confirmed that everyone was okay and that there was no internal damage. With no injuries reported among passengers or crew, and no signs of structural damage, the captain decided to continue the flight to San Francisco. To the passengers, it was over. To the pilots, it was a mistake they'd need to report. To investigators, it would become a near tragedy that could have ended the lives of 281 people. So what would you do if you were in the cockpit? Comment your thoughts below. Despite the terrifying near crash, United Airlines Flight 1722 continued to its destination, landing safely in San Francisco. The incident was initially not reported, as there was no damage or injuries. However, the National Transportation Safety Board learned of the event 2 months later and opened an investigation. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, determined that the primary cause of the altitude deviation was a miscommunication between the flight crew regarding the aircraft's flap settings during the initial climb. The captain and first officer had planned for a takeoff with flaps set to 20 degrees. However, due to the miscommunication, the first officer set the flaps to 15 degrees instead of the intended 5 degrees. This incorrect flap setting led to an aerodynamic imbalance, causing the aircraft to pitch down and descend rapidly. The crew's failure to manage the aircraft's vertical flight path, airspeed, and pitch attitude contributed to the incident. Following the incident, United Airlines collaborated with the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, and the pilots' union to implement corrective actions. The flight crew underwent additional training to reinforce proper communication protocols and flight path management. The airline also revised its training modules to emphasize the importance of clear communication, especially during critical phases of flight. An awareness campaign focusing on flight path management and adherence to standard operating procedures was launched at their training center. The NTSB's final report on the incident was released in August 2023, providing detailed insights into the contributing factors and corrective actions taken to prevent similar occurrences in the future. The investigation highlighted the critical need for clear communication and strict adherence to procedures during all phases of flight. Thanks for watching. What do you think was the most critical moment in the Flight 1722 incident? Have you ever experienced turbulence or a scary moment on a flight? Let me know your thoughts and stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you won't miss any of our future videos. Safe travels, and see you next time.